Oh man, that beautiful soundtrack, man. Oh man, that announcement that I'm gonna take you for a ride. Oh man, Marvel 2, man. What an amazing game. It is, to me, the quintessential fighting game. If you've never played Marvel 2, you missed out. Your life must be boring. Because Marvel 2 is, to me, arguably the best fighting game ever made. It may have problems, it may be broken, but man, is that game a work of art and a game that has stood the test of time even till now. And even just recently, we have people fighting to get it back. And I think we can do it. I think we can do it if we work together. We can bring Marvel 2 back, baby. But before we begin, let me get into this intro. Hello, welcome. It's your boy Jahi, aka that motherfucking Mr. Degenerate, back at it again. And I just wanted to talk about Marvel, man. Marvel 2, man, is world renowned. You have NBA players motherfucking making Marvel sheets, making the UI based off of the Marvel select screen. You have Michael B. Jordan talking about Marvel 2. Marvel 2 is influenced so many parts of fighting game. It is ridiculous. It is, to me, the gold standards of how you do a versus series. It has influenced your Dragon Ball fighters. It has influenced so many other team-based fighting games. It is ridiculous. The versus series, in particular the Marvel versus series, has stood the test of time, and it is very baffling that you can get Marvel 3, you can get Marvel Infinite, which is questionable game, which is fine. But you can get those games. But the one that everyone wants, everyone keeps talking about, you can never get is Marvel 2. Now, you can get Marvel 2, but you have to go through so much bullshit. You have to emulate it, or if you're in luck and you had a PS3 around the back in the day, you bought it, you can still download it up to this day. That being said, that's not how I want Marvel 2 to be remembered. I want Marvel 2 to be remembered for all the glorious times I've had it, all the glorious times that I played it with friends and family, and just remembering the good old days of Marvel 2. So instead of talking about, what I would like Marvel 2 to be, let's talk about how I got introduced to Marvel 2. So, around the time, let's go flashback. This is around the 90s, early 2000s. Marvel 2 wasn't slightly out yet, but it was coming out. Or it was out, but we didn't have it yet. So, back in the day, if you live in Brooklyn, you would know that Coney Island is like the biggest amusement park ever. The most ghettoest amusement park nowadays, but Coney Island, when I was growing up, was the place to be. It was the best hangout spot. It was the coolest hangout spot. Why? Because they had an huge arcade scene at Coney Island. And I just remember when I was a kid, my mom didn't really allow me to play fighting games all too much. The closest fighting game she's ever allowed me to play at that time was a game called I think it was Fighter Destiny 2, and it was this like 3D fighting game. It was really fun because it wasn't a traditional fighting game where it was like you had a health bar and you had to fight the opponent. Like the only way you can KO an opponent is if you did a special move. It was interesting, but my mom never really let me play a traditional fighting game. I've seen people play fighting games like around that arcade, they had Third Strike. They had so many different fighting games around that time. They had a lot of SNK games, a lot of Street Fighters. They had a lot of fighting games, but my mom would just never let me play those fighting games. And I remember going to the arcades one day, and I remember over in the corner, I never even realized this, over in the corner they had Marvel 1. And my mom was like, wait, isn't that Wolverine and Spider-Man? And I was like, where? Showed me Marvel 1, and I was like, huh, Spider-Man. And wait, isn't that karate dude? Like, Ryu? What? And I was just stunned as a kid. I was like, wait, Ryu and Spider-Man are in a game together? Wolverine too? Mega Man? Oh, what the fuck is this? And for me, that was my first introduction to the Versus series. Like, just seeing those characters. It was also the first time I got introduced to Morgan, one of my favorite Darkstalkers. It got me introduced to Strider. And it also got me introduced to Captain Commando. I was like, what the fuck are these characters? And I remember just playing that game with my mom. And I remember not knowing what character to pick. Automatically, I had Spider-Man, because Spider-Man is my boy. His favorite comic book character. Of course, I'm going to pick my boy Spider-Man. And I was going to pick Wolverine, but I waited until the timer was up. And the game just randomly gave me Morgan. And I was like, oh no, I don't know anything about this character. What the fuck is she? And then I played the game. I was like, oh, she kind of reminds me a little bit of the Ryu guy. She has a fireball. She has a dragon motion, which at the time I couldn't do. So I just was like wiggling the fucking controller like a fucking idiot. And it was just so much fun, though. And I remember just playing those games, playing it with my mom, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. This game is fun, and I got introduced to Morgan, and I was like, oh, I wonder what game she's from, or I wonder where else I can play her in, and because she was just so cheerful and whatnot. She's a very cheerful woman. Little did I know she's a fucking succubus. Anywho, and she had a cool design, but regardless of the point, I remember a few months later after playing Marvel 2, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 came out. And I remember the day I went to the arcades, and it was packed than usual. Usually the arcades would be packed, but it wasn't as packed before. When Marvel 2 hit, motherfuckers were shrouded around that arcade machine. You could never get a chance to play that game unless you... It got to the point where the owner of the store had to literally put us up on a line and be like, hey, if you want to play Marvel 2, you got to stand on this line. And if somebody... It goes from... That's what I learned about fighting game rules, which is the sets. It was like, oh, if you want to play this person, you got to stay... you got to play the best of 3. If you lose, you got to go back in the line. And it was so bonkers just watching that big-ass, crowded-ass line for people to play this one fighting game. And I was just stunned as a kid. My mom was like, she didn't see the fascination, but I was just stunned as a kid. And I was like, what is this game? And I was like, it's a sequel to Marvel 1? And people were fucking hyped. People were just talking online, hyping the game up. It was like, this game is the best fucking game ever. This game is fun. This game is mad thing. People were like, I remember people online, when they would lose, they would get angry because they had to go back in the fucking line and play it again. And people that were standing online were just sharing tips with each other. And I remember I got my chance to finally play Marvel 2, and I was just immediately blown away from not only just visuals, but just how the simple fact that characters, there were so much characters this time. They had pretty much all the X-Men from the 90s cartoon in it. They had Thanos. At the time, I didn't know who Thanos was. They had Blackheart, which I didn't know who Blackheart was. But for the most part, they had all the characters I ever wanted in a Marvel fighting game. But then on the flip side, on the Capcom side, Capcom had characters that I was just now getting introduced to. they had Ken, which to me at the time was, was my version of, was the fire version of Ryu. um, they had my girl Cammy, which was kind of my first introduction to Cammy, because I was so used to seeing Third Strike, I've never seen Cammy, so that was my first introduction to Cammy. And then I was like, oh, I recognize that Jill character. Wasn't she from that horror game I saw my friend play? That, what is it called? Resident Evil? And then some returning characters. Like, I remembered Morgan, but, motherfucking the cat girl, Felicia. I was like, who is she? Who is she? What game is she from? And then, like, people was just telling me, like, oh, well, she's from this game called Darkstalkers. And I was just blown away as a kid. I was just like, wow. And then this time, you have to pick 3 characters instead of 1. You had 3 characters. And then you didn't just have 3 characters. You have to micromanage 3 characters. Not only that, all of them can be called in the assist at any time. And just like in the original game, you can switch. You can switch at any moment. But this time, if you hit an opponent when you're switching, you can air combo into that. It was fucking bonkers. And just seeing how much people was willing to teach me and also willing to teach other people was bonkers at the time when I was growing up. Like, just the amount of camaraderie of people just wanting to learn the game, wanting to play the game was fantastic when I was growing up. It generally touched me as a kid, watching people learning the game, wanting to learn and teach me how to play the game and teach me how to get better. I never got better, but I learned how to do. But to do web ball, I learned how to do a dragon, a quarter circle motion, because I could never do it when I was a kid. I used to always just button mash, but people actually taught me how to do that. Taught me how to do web swing. Taught me how to play these characters. Taught me dragon motions and regular motions, and it was so interesting just being in that environment, and everybody was just always trying to learn from each other. And at the time, there was no Twitter, there wasn't no it wasn't no YouTube or anything, there wasn't no influencer, so you couldn't be like, I'm gonna go and learn how to do fucking Iron Man Infinite, or I'm gonna go and learn Magneto's Infinite Combo. Like, we all had to discover that at the same time. In fact, I remember the day when I saw the Magneto, a really good Magneto player. All of us was kind of, people that was watching it, we were all kind of stunned, because at the time, we never knew that Magneto was like the most OP character in the game. It was bonkers, just experiencing that for the first time. And then, it wasn't until later that I was just thinking to myself, oh, well, fighting games probably don't have that same amount of love and camaraderie that the Marvel vs. Capcom. But then, years later when when Street Fighter 4 came out, that's when I heavily saw the fighting game community and how passionate they are about their game. And of course, you can't have a Marvel game without your boy Yipes doing the commentary. So, Yipes, that's how I got introduced to Yipes commentary, and the way how he would commentate Marvel was hilarious when I was growing up. But at the same time, it was fucking dope, because Yipes would genuinely be telling you and teaching you how the game ran, and it was so cool. Then of course Justin, I was like, oh, I always knew Cyclops was fucking over the top, and he always had, to me, one of the coolest supers with his fucking behold, take off the glasses, throw the glasses away, octet blast, big ass beam. But yeah, at the time, I've seen people do it, but I never realized what they were doing until people was breaking it down in commentary, what Justin Wong was doing when he was doing the jump circle, circle, jump heavy, 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 building meters. At the time when I was young, I didn't realize, like, oh, if you do that, you can build meter fast. He builds meter fast. Of course, obviously, as we got further on in the life cycle of Marvel, we realized, yeah, the whole game is pretty much broken, and only like 4 characters are kind of OP. Everybody else is kind of lame and whatever. But I think the point of this whole retrospect of Marvel 2 for me was it brought me into a community I've never really realized until Marvel. I didn't realize I was a part of that community in some way until Marvel 2 came out. And Marvel 2 to me is an iconic game because it did a good job, at least for me. I can only speak from my experience of bringing hardcore fighting game audience and a casual comic book fan together, because it was so fun growing up just talking to people about comic books, and me being a comic book head explaining, well, why Wolverine has Bone Claw in this game and where he get his adamantium, and explaining that to people who never touched a fucking comic book in their entire life, explaining that to them. It merged 2 different worlds together, comic book fans and fighting game fans, and it was so much fun. And then I felt like I was teaching them, but they were teaching me. And to me, Marvel 2 will always have a special place in my heart because it was the game that introduced me to the fighting game genre, introduced me to fighting, to the fighting game landscape. But it was also the first game that brought in 2 of my favorite companies together, and I couldn't be more prouder to be a part of that. Now, even nowadays, Marvel 2 is still going strong. Is it amazing? I've never seen a fighting game. Even one of my also favorite fighting games, Soul Calibur 2, I've never seen a fighting game get so much love and support as much as Marvel 2. And this is a game that came out 20 plus years ago. This is a game that is still being talked about up to this day, and it still has a passionate community. Up to this now, there's still tournaments going on where people are literally saying, okay, we already know the OP characters are OP. How about we make a fucking tournament where we only play as broken, as the weak characters, and people are coming up with some wonky shit. I remember this one dude, he's playing Spider-Man and Hiroko, the guy with the laser sword. I'm like, what the fuck? And I think he had Hulk on his team. I was like, what the fuck? Hayato and Spider-Man on a team together. I was like, what the fuck is this? I've never seen this wonky, busted ass team. It was so amazing. And funny enough for me, my team in the game was always Spider-Man, Morgan, and Jill. Especially Jill, because Jill will actually hold you in place with the zombies. And it was cool. And I love her animation when it was like a zombie would come, she'd be like, huh? It was so cool, man. And I just remember, and at the time, people would be stunned to see me play that, because it's everyone would be like, well, you're not playing the most broken characters, what the fuck? And it's I'm not even that great at the game, I'm horrible. But just to play the game, I've just been so much. And it's just Marvel 2 is such an amazing game. So for me, my biggest dream, and why I'm so adamant about this free Marvel hashtag, is because I want Marvel 2 to come back, and I want people who's never played it to play it. I think people's played Marvel 3, and obviously Infinite was a situation, and we've moved on from that. But I think right now people starving for some Marvel, baby. We starving for some Marvel, and what a better way to bring Marvel back in one of its best and most influential games, Marvel 2. And I think Capcom and Marvel has the capacity to really show the fan base that we still think about Marvel and we would like to make more Marvel. And I think that would work out for us. I think Marvel needs to come back. It needs people to play it. And I think people will purchase Marvel if you give them the option, Capcom and Marvel. I think people want to play these characters. People would love to play Marvel. People would love to reinvigorate Marvel and show that Marvel is still here to stay. So, I oppose to you, my audience, if you have ever played Marvel or any of the Marvel games, but in particular two, comment on below and tell me first of all, what's your team in Marvel, but also I would love for you guys to tell me how did you get into Marvel, the Marvel Versus series? Like, were you at a friend's house? Were you at an arcade? What made you play the game? And maybe, if not, make your own video talking about your history with the game. I would love to hear it. You know, you can even send it to me. I would love to hear people talk about Marvel, man. Marvel is one of the best fighting games ever made, and I think the newer generation needs to see it and play it and experience the best pixel art, the best music, even though we have one of the quirkiest fucking goddamn select screen music, still the best. Listen, play Marvel, baby. Marvel is here, man. Capcom, get on it, man. We want some Marvel, baby. We want that Marvel, baby. Anywho, it's your boy, Mr. Degenerate. I'm signing out.